Hi, this is Julie with Beadaholique, and in this video I'm going to teach you how to make your own aromatherapy bracelet using lava beads. So this is a fun project, and you're going to definitely want to incorporate lava beads into the design because they're very porous and they absorb the essential oils. So what you're going to need for this project is some beading wire. I'm using Flexrite. I'm using Flexrite because I want to be using the magical crimp forming tool, which is going to make really nice, neat little ball crimps versus ones which look squashed if you're familiar with crimp beads, and you usually have to put a crimp bead cover over them. But in this case, you're not going to, so I'm going to be using the Flexrite. I'm also going to be using the crimp beads, which are the magical crimps, which work really great with this tool as well. It's nice because you can use a plated crimp with a magical crimping tool now. I'm also going to be using a magnetic clasp because it's just nice to have a magnetic clasp on a bracelet. It makes it easier to get on and off. For my lava bead selection, we do have quite a few different sizes at Beadaholique, and I'm going to be using the 4mm. I'm going to pair that with some 6mm Howlite. And then I'm going to be using these tiara cast beads, which are a 7.5mm. I'm going to be using 5 of them. I just thought it'd be fun to have graduated sizes here. Now for my essential oils, I'm using jewel drops. These are exclusive to Beadaholique. And we have 10mm bottles of them, and they are 100% pure essential oil with no additives, which means they're really strong. So 1 to 2 drops goes a really long ways. There's lavender, sweet orange, peppermint, eucalyptus, lemongrass, and tea tree. So I think I am going to use the peppermint. That's my favorite scent. In terms of the tools you're going to need, a bead stopper, a magical crimp forming tool, and a pair of cutters. So not a lot of tools needed. So to begin, since this is a traditional strung bracelet, I'm going to cut off enough beading wire not only for the length of my bracelet, but to accommodate the crimping process. So if you want a 7-inch bracelet, you'll want to allow at least 3 to 4 extra inches on each side. So I'm going to eyeball this, but I'm going to cut off about 15 inches here. And put my wire aside, and then to one end of it I'm going to apply my bead stopper. If you're not familiar with a bead stopper, they're really cool and easy to use. You just pinch it and it fans out like an accordion, and you just place your wire into one of the little rungs and then let go, and it pinches it, but it doesn't harm your wire, which is nice. So that is my bead stopper. It'll keep my beads from falling off, and I have it about 3 inches from the end. Now, to make this bracelet, I think the pattern I want to do is 12 of these lava beads on one side. So there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, it could be hard to see their holes because they're so porous. 10, double check, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So if you're not familiar with beading wire, it's this really great wire that you don't need to apply a needle to. It's stiff enough to use as the needle. Now I'm going to go ahead and add 3 of these beautiful Howlite gemstone beads. So 1, 2, 3, followed by 5 of these tiara cast beads. 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is the beginning of my bracelet, and now I'm just going to mirror it on this side. And you can make this design as large or as small as you like because you're going to get plenty of beads. So I'm going to do 3 more. So 1, 2, 3 of the Howlite, and then 12 more on this side. All right, so we've got all of our beads strung. And you know what? The beauty of a bead stopper is that if you say you want to add some extra beads to this end, you just take off the bead stopper and add your beads. So then you don't have to start over, which is really nice, or take all these off just to add some to the beginning. So for instance, right now I can add the crimp bead that I know I'm going to need to this end, and then reapply the bead stopper. And then I'll do the same on this end. I'll add one crimp bead. So a good tip if you're making this for yourself is before you add the clasp and actually crimp your crimp beads, try on your bracelet and make sure it's the size you want. Now this would be a little bit large for my wrist, but I have a little bit of a smaller than average wrist. But you could also just be like, okay, maybe I just want 10 of those lava beads on each side. You could just take off 2, but I do want to actually keep it that original size. So I'll just string these guys back on. Okay. So now we're ready to add our clasp. If you're working with a magnetic clasp, separate it out so you just have 1/2. And then we're going to take our beading wire, feed it through that little loop, and then loop it back around and go back down through the crimp bead. So you're making a nice little loop and you want to pull it up towards your clasp. So you got enough room for the clasp to move that's not too tight, but that it's not a huge loop there either, because you don't want to see a big loop. Okay, so that's about right. And now we're going to use our magical crimp forming tool. This is a really cool crimping plier. So you'll notice it doesn't have 2 notches like a traditional crimping plier. It's got 1 notch, and in it is almost like a circular round divot on both sides. And so what you're going to do is you're going to take your crimp bead and you're going to place it in that round divot. But what you're going to make sure is that it's not sticking out any one side. You want it evenly placed in the center. And that used to be the mistake I would make. I would look at it from this angle and be like, oh, it's in there. But it would actually only be half in that divot and half just at the edge of my pliers, and it wouldn't work right. So just double check and then just squeeze it. Give it a light squeeze and then rotate it. Make sure, again, it's in that center. You'll kind of feel it rest in there. And squeeze it. And we're just turning it ever so slightly, always checking its placement. And we're just compressing it. And you see what we're getting here is this almost like a little mini bead. And now I'm just going to trim off the long tail. And I sometimes do feed it back through my beads, but the hole on the lava beads is not quite large enough to feed it back through. So there we go, we have one end. And now we're going to do the same to the other side. So we've already got that crimp bead on there. We're going to string on our clasp. Okay, and now we're going to go back through that crimp bead. And in this case, you're going to check to make sure that you don't leave too much of a gap between your beads here that have been strung on and that crimp bead. So you're going to pull it down. Pull that magnetic clasp up and pull. And what I like to do to make sure it's not too stiff is at this point, I do like to make sure that it will make a nice circle that's not too stiff and kinks. So once you have it how you want it, and you can sometimes leave a little bit of a gap because when your beads curve around your wrist, that gap gets filled. So yeah, you definitely don't want it too tight. Okay. Okay. Okay, so we're going to expose the crimp bead as best as we can. We're going to put it in the magical crimp forming tool. And we're just going to carefully go around. And this is magnetic, so you might have it sticking to your pliers a little bit if you're using a magnetic clasp like I am. Can be a little easier in this instance since it is magnetic. to just keep it in there as you rotate. And then trim your tail. Ooh, it's going to stick to my cutters as well. Okay, there we go. So we've got the clasp. We've got our beads. And now what we need to do is turn this into an aromatherapy bracelet. So grab some paper towels to cover your work surface. And choose your favorite essential oil. So like I said, I really love peppermint, so I'm going to be using peppermint. And the reason you'd be creating essential oil aromatherapy jewelry is to be able to take this scent with you on the go. So as you go throughout the day and you're out and about, you're not home near your own diffuser, this acts as a little, essentially like a little diffuser. It's with you as you go, and you'll use 1 to 2 drops. And that will last you 1 to 2 days. And then you can always reapply more later. Or if you like it a stronger scent, you can add more than 2 drops. So what I like to do is I like to hold my bracelet like this. So my fingers are away from the oil, and I'm holding it over the paper towel. And I'm just going to a couple little drops right there, and 2 came out very nicely and very quickly. Now, if you wanted to, sometimes you could even take like the little lip of the bottle right here and spread that out so it goes over more than just 1 bead. But that is all you need to do. And then I would rest it on your paper towel for about 10 minutes. Now, that did not look like a lot of oil coming out, but this is 100% pure essential oil. This is very concentrated. There's no additives or carriers, so a little does go a long way. And I would always recommend experimenting. If you think you're going to want a stronger scent, try just the 1 to 2 drops for an hour or 2, and then if you do want more, add more then. But start out slowly, because this is wonderful. It's very lovely smelling, but a little does go a long way. And that is how you make your very own aromatherapy bracelet using lava beads.